So my food das gemacht in die Camp Armenian. To learn them to the boys. Of course, the boys didn't believe in anything anymore.
Yeah.
So my father went to the Clausberger Rebbe. The Claus.
Today's daf is Daf Chof Beis in Masechta Gittin, and we're going to be learning Lili Nishmas, my grandmother, a real survivor, Yittel Bas Rab Nachum. Okay, and we learned today.
Hat gesucht, om het schraben get of horen. Wie kan ich schraben get of horen?
Klitzt daran. Okay. The Mishnah said that you can't write a get on mechuba lekarka. You can't write a get that's connected to the ground. And if you wrote it connected to the ground and then you severed it and signed it and gave it to her, it's kosher. So the Gemara doesn't understand that this doesn't make sense. We're starting from the Gemara right after the Mishnah Chaf Aleph and Beis. V'amrit Reisha, you just told me in the on the beginning, ein koisvin. You're not allowed to write a get when it's connected to the ground on a leaf or whatever. And then you said that you could write it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, that means v'hu sheshia makayim hatoyref. There are two parts to a get. We're going to learn this. There's called a toyref, which is the name of her, the name of him, the name of the city. That's called the revealed part of the get. And then there's called the toifes, which is toifes is like template. It's the regular statement, the regular common statement for each and every get. So we're going to see that what the Mishnah means to say is that the main part of the get that you cannot write when it's connected to the ground is called the toiref, the name, his name, her name, and the name of the city. That's what it Mishnah means. That you left over and you do not write when it's connected to the ground, the part of the get that's called toiref, which is the revealed part of the get. And the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Laza, the Amad, who said, what makes a get is the giving of the get. In other words, if you look at the psukim, and I have it up here on the screen, the Torah writes, the cost of lost sefer krisis v'nasan. You have to write a document that divides the marriage, that cuts the marriage, and give it to her. Now, what does it mean, v'kosav? You have to write it. So, according to Rabbi Lazar, you just write a document that says we're getting divorced. And what really makes the get is that you give this document in front of two eidim, so they know which husband gave to which wife a get. It's called eidim asira karse. But according to Rav Maya, the kosav means no. You have to sign the get. You don't really need eidim witnessing as you're giving. The man is giving the get to the woman. This can be done in private. They could be in a room by themselves. As long as there's eidim sign on the get, that makes the get correct. That's Rav Meir's seed. So this is the way the Gemara is going to explain our Mishnah. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yochanan explained our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer, and the Mishnah means to say, "Ein kaisen toifis." You're not allowed to write the template of the get, Shema Yiktaf Torah, because maybe you will write while it's connected to the ground the Torah, the revealed part of the get. If you wrote the template and then you cut it off, and the ksave l'torif, and then you wrote the revealed part, and the son-in-law kosher, then it's kosher. So really, what the Mishnah is trying is try to write the get totally, the template and the revealed part, totally when it's not connected to the ground. But the eved, if you wrote the template part, the not important part of the get, and then you severed it, and then wrote the important part, the torif of the get, it's kosher. Why? Because edim misire karsa, because the edim witness as it's giving. As you're giving it to the lady. And that what the Mishnah means of a chasama, it's very important. Chasama in the son-in-law doesn't mean you signed it and gave it to her, because according to Rabbi Lezer, you don't need to sign a get. What it means is you finished off the get by writing the Torah. Chasama means you finished off the get by writing in his name and her name. Rish Lakish Amar, Rish Lakish says no. Chasama shanina. Our Mishnah says you actually signed the get. So our Mishnah must be talking about that there are eidim signed on to the get. So who could be the author of our Mishnah? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir. That our Mishnah goes according to who? Rabbi Meir. And the Omar who said, Eidi Chasima Karse. What makes a get? the chasam, you have to have Eidim, that sign on the bottom of the page of the get. So then how do you learn pshat in the Mishnah? This is what the Mishnah needs to say. Ein koisvin toiret. You're not allowed to write the revealed part of the get, the names, when it's connected to the ground. Because Shema Yachtan. If you wrote part of the get while it's connected to the ground, you're gonna sign it. You're gonna have the Eidim sign it while it's connected to the ground, and then it's puzzle. But if you wrote the whole get, and then while it's connected to the ground, to loshoy, and then you uprooted it and you cut it off the tree, and chasama, and then you signed it, when the son alone you gave it to her, kosher, because what makes the get? The signing of the get, and the signing has to be done while it's not connected to the ground. New Gemara. To savai, I don't know, people don't have plants anymore in the house, but we used to have a lot of plants in our house where there's a plot, as you know, you have a flower pot and it has holes on the bottom. So, according to the way the Gemara understands, is that when a flower pot has holes on the bottom, it's almost similar as if it's connected to the ground, because it gets yanika, it gets sustenance, it gets nourishment, although it's not connected physically to the ground. But since there's a hole in the bottom of the pot, there's some sustenance comes out. So ksavai al chayres shel otzes nokiv. If you wrote a get on a flower pot that has a hole in it, right? So really, the flower pot should be considered as if it's connected to the ground. So imagine you wrote the get on the flower pot that has a hole in it. So the flower pot is somewhat viewed as if it's connected to the ground. Kosher, it's kosher. The shakale, v'yavle nele, because all you have to do is take the flower pot. You don't have to cut it off the ground because it's not physically connected to the ground. All you got to do is take it and give it to her. But what happens? You have a flower pot that has a hole in it, so it's really viewed as connected to the ground. And instead of writing the get on the flower pot, you wrote it al olesh al. You wrote it on a leaf. Let's say on the plant that's in the flower pot, on a leaf, you wrote the get. So Abaya Oma kosher. Abaya says this is a kosher get. Rava Oma posel. Rava says it's posel. So Abaya Oma kosher. Abaya says it's kosher. We go to Chaf Beis Amid Aleph because it's very simple, because it's on the leaf. So if it's on the leaf, but physically you don't have to cut the whole off the leaf and give it to her. Remember, if you have to do another thing after you write the get, such as cutting it and then giving to her, then it's puzzle. But here, the shakale, you take the whole flower pot, and you give it over to her. But Rava says, since it's written on the leaf, it's puzzle. Why? Gezerah Shema Yichtaim. I'm afraid that maybe instead of giving her the whole flower pot, you're just going to cut off the leaf. You're going to cut off the leaf and then give her the get. And once you wrote the get and you have another step in between of cutting it, and then you're giving it to her, then it's a posel get. It has to be that you write it and giving it to her. So we have a gzeira that we're concerned that maybe you're going to cut the leaf off and then just give her the leaf without giving her the full flower pot. So therefore, Rava holds if you wrote a get on the leaf that's in this flower pot, it's a puzzle again. Now the Gemara talks about like this. Remember, let's imagine a flower pot. You have a flower pot full of earth, right? And so the flower pot itself is viewed as, let's say, a movable object, right? And movable objects, if you want to purchase them, all you have to do is do a mashicha, or just lift it up and bring it towards you. If you want to buy a cup, or a becher, you just lift it up and bring it to you. So if you want to purchase the flower pot, it has a din of metaltalin, and you just bring it to you. But if you want to buy the earth that's in the flower pot, well, the earth, since it's connected to the ground because there's a hole in the flower pot, so the earth inside the flower pot is considered like buying land. And therefore, if you want to purchase land, there's no such a thing of lifting land and bringing it to you. So in order to purchase land, you have to show that you acquire it by doing what's called chazaka. So you would have to, let's say, take dirt or rake the dirt, rake the flower pot a little bit, and show like you're owning the dirt inside the flower pot. So let's read it inside. Otzitz, you have a flower pot. Shel echad, if the flower pot belongs to one person. Uzraim, but the plant inside the flower pot, shel acher, belongs to somebody else. So Mocher Baal Otzis LeBaal Zroyim, if the flower pot owner wants to sell his share to the plant owner, so the otzis is really a movable item. The kaven shemachshach, as soon as the plant owner lifts the flower pot, kana, he owns the whole plant with the pot. Because to purchase a pot, the flower pot, all you need to do is lift it. But if the owner of the plant sells to the owner of the flower pot, so then loikana, the flower pot doesn't transfer ownership. Why? Until you do chazaka in the plant. And the way to do chazaka is you'd have to pull out some weeds around the plant, or play around with the dirt to show that he did chazaka. Because in order to buy the dirt, to buy the plant, you have to do chazaka, because that's karka. Now the Gemara says, let's say the flower pot with the plant belong to one person. He wants to sell the whole thing to somebody else. So hechzik b'zroyim, if he did chazaka, as we explained, if he did a chazaka in the plant, kana otzis, then you could automatically buy the flower pot, because the flower pot is like a movable item, and we have a din that if you purchase land, there's something called kinyan agav. You automatically purchase whatever on the land. So, for example, if you purchase a field and there's a tractor on that land, since you bought the field, so automatically you don't have to do a special kinyan on the tractor, because it's a movable item. The same thing over here. Since you did chazaka on the plant, automatically you get the pot. That's what we learned. The chosim shein lamachrayis, the chosim that have no responsibility, that's movable metaltalin. Niknim can be purchased in the chosim sheyesh lamachrayis with possessions that do have responsibility, which the chosim sheyesh lamachrayis is another way to say karka. So you can purchase karka and get along with it metaltalim. All you have to do is kesef, shtar, or chazaka, or by paying money, or writing up a deed document, or doing chazaka, showing acquisition. Hechzik is, but if you do chazaka in the flower pot, well, the flower pot is a movable object. There's no such a thing of chazaka with that. Af otzis leikana, achi yachzib Israel. You don't get the otzis, you don't get the flower pot until you redo chazaka in the plant itself. Next. Let's say you have a flower pot. Now we go to maestras. Let's say you have a flower pot that has a hole in it, okay? But the plant is located in Israel. But the branches off the plant in the flower pot reach over b'chutz la'aretz. So you're really at the border, right? So it reaches over into chutz la'aretz. So let's say it's growing apples on there. So from that flower pot, since the apples are growing in chutz la'aretz, Abaya says basei nikveh is leading. You go where the hole goes, and therefore the whole of it is located in yeah. The hole is located in the hole is located in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, you have to chayiv maises. Rava says bosa noifle azlinan. You have to go where the branches are, where the apples are. And since the apples are located in chutz la'aretz, so therefore it's not potter for maises. Now the Gemara says like this: Bida ashrus kuli amalei pligi. If the flower pot is laying on the ground and it's taking root through the holes in the flower pot into the earth in Israel, there's no argument, because everybody knows that if a tree is planted in Israel, even if the branches reach across into chutz la'aretz, that tree is chayiv b'maisrus, because you go where it's really planted. The argument is, but it didn't take root into the ground. The roots are still in the flower pot. And therefore, Abaya says, still you go, since it takes some sustenance from the ground, therefore you look at this as an Eretz Yisrael digga fruit. Rava says, since it's not really connected to the ground, it's just taking a little bit sustenance. Most of the sustenance come where the branches lean over, and since the branches lean over into chutz la'aretz, so most of the sustenance of this fruit comes from chutz la'aretz, and therefore it's potter for maisers. Says the Gemara of the ashrus loy pligi, wherever it takes root, nobody will hold that you go after the branches. But now we learned in the Mishnah, and here's the picture of something like this, and so you can see what we're talking about over here. We're talking about over here very clearly. You have you have here, right over here on the side, where my thing is. You have two grounds, two fields. One is the top field, and one is the bottom field. And somebody planted a vegetable right in on the wall between the top and the bottom. So it's on the wall. So now the Yanika is on the Elyon, but the branches go onto the airspace of the bottom field. So there's a guy owns the top field, and another person owns the bottom field. Who owns this vegetable patch? That's a Mishnah Masechta Bava Metzia. So the Gemara says like this: Shtei gina zu al gavzu. You have two gardens, one on top of another. The Yerek ben Taim. There's a vegetable on the wall between the top one and the bottom one. Rabbi Meir Oimer Shel Elyon. Rabbi Meir says the vegetable belongs to the top one. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Shel Tachton. It belongs to the bottom one. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda holds since it belongs to the bottom one, even though it's getting nourishment over here by the top one. So we see Rabbi Yehuda says you always pay attention to the branches, even though its roots are in somewhere else. So if so, so you're telling me that if it took root, you'd never go after the branches. Here you see Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if it took root, you always go after the branches. Answers the Gemara, Hasam Kidiktani Taima. There's a special reason for that. Amar Rabbi Meir, there we're talking about not regarding Maestros. We're talking about who owns that vegetable patch. Amar Rabbi Meir, Ma im rotzu yit elyon til safari ein kanyeret. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Ma im yitzatachel malas skinosei alfa ein kanyeret. There, it's just referring to who owns the vegetable patch. So Rabbi Meir says that the person, the top one, owns the vegetable patch, because if he takes away chisels out all his land and just levels it off with the bottom guy's field, like you see in the picture, so then you don't even have a vegetable. So the ownership really of this vegetable belongs to the top person. But that's what Rabbi Meir will hold. Rabbi Yehuda holds no. Rabbi Yehuda holds, well, take a look at the bottom guy. If he removes if he takes away his field and levels it upwards, if he moves it upwards, then if he would, let's say, move it upwards, it's supposed to be moving it upwards, then you don't even have a vegetable. So it's a question of who really owns this vegetable patch. And therefore, that's the machlekes over there, but it has nothing to do with maestros. By maestros, we go, if it takes root in Israel, the branches go to Chutz La'aretz. You always go where it takes fruit, where it took root. Says the Gemara, if it took root, you have no argument that it's an Israel type of fruit. That means you look at where the roots are. But Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, and a tree that part of the fruits are in Israel and part of it in Chutz La'aretz are in Chutz La'aretz. So imagine a fruit tree. Part of the branches are in Israel. Part of the branches are in Chutz La'aretz. Tevel v'chulim u'ravim zebazedi b'Rebbe. Rebbe says every fruit is a mixture of tevel and chulim. Some parts are chayiv ma'asros, some part are not chayiv ma'asros. So it's one big mish over here. The part that so every fruit is like a basa b'chalav, like a total mixture, and therefore you have to ma'asra on this tree by itself, because each fruit is a half a ma'aser and half a not. It's not chayiv ma'aser. Divrei Rebbe, that's Rebbe's opinion. Shimon Gamaliel says, you look at where the branches. Hagodah b'chiyev chayiv, hagodah b'ptur potter. Wherever the branches, if the branches is in Israel, it's chayiv and fruit, chayiv and maasros. If it grows, if you look at the branches over the border, then it's potter and maasros. So now, my love, don't you think, miktzas noifai ba'aretz, miktzas noifai b'chutz la'aretz. Really, it's actually totally in the ground in Israel. But the question is, some branches are in Israel and some branches are Chutz La'aretz. But where is the trunk? Where is the roots of the tree? The roots of the tree is in Israel. And yet, according to Rebbe, it's you still view it as it that you still take it of where the branches are, and wherever the branches are, even according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and even according to Rebbe, you view it as a potter digger, as a potter digger fruit, because we go after where the branches is, even though despite the fact that it's really planted in Israel. So the Gemara says, no, not the pshat in the Brisa. Loi, mixas rashim ba'aretz, mixas rashim chutz la'aretz. The Brisa is talking about where half the branches, where half the roots are in Israel and half the roots are chutz la'aretz. So if so, umay tama the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, if half the roots are in chutz la'aretz, so why would Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel say? Why would Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel say that the part that's in Gadol b'chiyav chayev, Gadol b'ptur pater? So the Gemara says the mafsik sunuma. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says since there's a rock in between the roots. So imagine a rock underneath the ground that separates the roots that are in Israel from the roots that are in Chutz La'aretz. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is confident to say that the branches that reach over in Chutz La'aretz it takes its sustenance only from the roots that are in Chutz La'aretz, because there's a little rock that divides up the roots underground. So then, my time of the Rebbe, why would Rebbe hold that even though it grows in Chutz La'aretz, it's a mixture of Eretz Yisrael root, the Hadra Adre, because it mixes up again. Because although there's a rock that divides the roots, but once you get to the trunk, it's one trunk, and one trunk that joins the whatever was the sustenance of Chutz La'aretz with the sustenance of Israel, and they give the tam of each fruit a mixture of Eretz Yisrael digger fruits and Chutz La'aretz's fruits. That's why Rebbe holds it's all mixed up. Rebbe holds that once you get into the trunk, they all join in together. Umar Sover Shimon ben Gamliel says no, since it's separated by the roots, then the sustenance never joins again. Mar Sover each one is separately. Next Gemara. Yehuda ben Meseira Omer. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Asi mishmei de Ula. Rabbi Chia bar Asi said in the name of Ula, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira said you can write on a get on a document that potentially could easily be erased. So the Gemara just elaborates on one small thing. First of all, the halacha is that when you carry on Shabbos, in order to chayev, you have to carry something that is a worthy item. You can't say if you carry a crumb outside on Shabbos, even when there's no Erev, of course, you chayev, because a crumb is nothing. It has to be a certain size, and there's many mishnayos that discuss what's the size of every item in order to be chayev from the avera of haitzar. So when it comes to leather, the Gemara says in the name of Ula, gumil oiresei. There are three types of leather. Matzah, chipa, v'diftera. The matzah, what's a matzah leather? There's actually a leather called matzah. Kimashmoy, the way you think it is. Because in order to process leather, you have to do three things: salt it, put flour on it, and put gall nuts. And this is a type of leather that's not processed well. You didn't put salt, flour, or gall nut. So l'may hilchasa l'hitzah Shabbos. To teach you the kama shiuri, how much of this leather do you have to carry out in order to be chayev on Shabbos? That's a big amount to be able to wrap a small weight. The kama, what's the small weight? Like the quarter of a pompadisa. In other words, they had these weights that they used to, when you were selling something, you had weights for your scale. In order to wrap the weight so that it doesn't, rub out, they would wrap it with this type of leather. So if you have that amount that could cover that kind of a weight of river to river, pompadisa, that special weight, that is the size that if you would carry that matzah leather out into the street on Shabbos, you would be chayav. Chifa, what is a chifa leather? The meliach v'loy kamiyah. That's salted, but not doesn't have flour. V'loy apis, it doesn't have gall nuts. It wasn't processed with gall nuts. My hilkasel haitzah Shabbos. V'kama shi'urei. What is the chifa amount? What is the size of that leather that if you carry it on Shabbos, you'll be chayev? Yidetran or k'dei lasas beikmeya. When they can make an amulet from it, they write some magical statements on it that for some reason it help people who are sick. If you carry the amount that they normally could be able to make a kameya on it, then that kind of leather you'd be chayiv on Shabbos. Diftera is the meliach v'kamiyach v'loy apitz. It's salted and you put flour on it, but you didn't put gall nut. L'may hilkasod loitzah Shabbos. The kama shi'urei. How much of diftera is the size of diftera that if you carry it, you'll be chayiv on Shabbos. Today, lichtov olaf's get. If it has the size that you could write a get on this diftera, which is according to the Chachamim, you could write a get on a diftera piece of paper, on a diftera, which is a type of a parchment that could be a type of leather that you could erase with it. You could just rub it out. So then that you would be chayiv on Shabbos. Imagine though a parchment, a regular worked out parchment. The Mishnah says, I think it's the sizes that you could write a little mezuzah. That's the size. But anything smaller than that, you're not chayiv in Shabbos. The Gemara says, "V'chachamim machshiram." So we'll just turn the page. Man chachamim. Who's the chachamim that say that you could write a get on a type of writing paper that you could actually rub out and erase it? Amar Rab Lazar, the Amoira said, it's Rab Lazahi. It's actually the Tana Rab Lazar, the Amar Edi Masira Karse. We go to Amar Beis. It's who said that really what makes a get is the Adam witnessing off how you transfer the get from him to her. Because what's the problem? Why would we think that it would be wrong to write a get on something that could easily be erased? Because maybe there was a condition written on that get, and maybe she erased it, or she's going to erase it. But since, according to Rab Lazar, in order to make a get, you need two Adam witnessing the husband giving it over to the wife, and they read the get prior to him giving it over to her. They know that there was a condition there, so she can't lie that there was no condition, because the Adam could say testimony about that. The Amar Rab Lazar, but Rab Lazar said, Lehiksha Rab Lazar, the Amoira Rab Lazar said, Lehiksha Rab Lazar el alter. Rab Lazar only permitted you to use such a get. The Tana only permitted to use such a get if she, as soon as she gets the get, she runs to Bezdin and says, "Hey, I just got a get. Am I permitted to get married again?" And Bezdin gives her like a piece of paper. Yes, you're permitted to get your get is kosher, and you're permitted to get married again. But if she waited 10 days after she received the get, and then she goes to the Bezdin, then we won't believe her. Why? Because since it's being written on this forgeable type of paper, you're going to call the Eidim in and say, you saw the man give it to her? They'll say yes. They're going to ask the Eidim, was there a condition on this get? It's 10 days ago. They may have forgotten that there was a condition on the get. And therefore, then it won't be kosher. So if she receives a get that's written on this funny paper that's easily erasable, she has to get it validated right away, permission for her to get married. But if it's 10 days later, then it's beyond, this get is no good. She can't get married with such a get. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan said that even if it's long time after she got the get, she could really go into Bezdin and get permission to get married again. Because if the Bezdin will call in the Eidim and say, was there a condition on this get? When they think about it, they'll remember that there was a condition. So therefore, it's, even though the paper is no good, it could have easily been forged and erased, but the Eidim will always remember that there was a condition on this get, and they'll make sure that it was taken care of. One more thing. Rab Lazar said, Rab Lazar elo begittin. The only permission that you have is on a get to write it on a forgeable document, on a forgeable paper. That kind of paper is good for a regular get isha. Al bashar taharis loy. When it comes to a loan, like a loan document or a sale document, then it has to be written on paper that cannot be erased. The ksiv, because as the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, that when you write a document, a sale document, it has to be able to be preserved for many days, not a type of paper document that's easily erasable. That's the opinion of Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yochanan says, even a regular sale document, you can write it on this paper that's easily erased. The pasuk says that you have to write a sale document on paper that can last for many days. And says the Gemara, it's not an obligation, it's good advice. Because what will prove that the sale is valid is only because you have Adi Masira, witnesses, because they're not going to trust this document if you can see that it's easily erased. Because maybe you're going to say that the document says that someone loaned $1,000, you wrote $10,000. What's going to make it is Adi Masira, the witnesses that really saw the transaction. but the witnesses won't live forever. They may die. So the Tanakh gives you a good idea when you write transactions, loans, and sales, write it on document that can last for a long time and on paper that's unerasable. So the document will never be called into question when you pull it out. And that's just an advice, but it can be done even on paper that's easily erasable. So ends this sugya of Daf Kaf Beis.